This is Jamie Dyer welcoming you to another edition of the Quo-Cast. And if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, email quocast@outlook.com. That's quocast@outlook.com. You can tweet at castquo on Twitter, or you can visit the Facebook page and put a post up there. Yes, it's just simply the Quo-Cast. So we're a couple of episodes into this series of the Quo-Cast, and I didn't know what to do because we've had an introductory podcast for the season. We've had an interview, which was great, wasn't it? Thank you, Alan, for doing that. And we have many more things to come, but I'm trying to establish a format of 1 week me, 1 week interview, 1 week me, 1 week interview. So I'm here this week to talk to you about an element of Quo. I like to focus on the areas of Quo's career that perhaps you haven't really considered too much, or maybe people haven't given too much credit for. I've thought quite long and hard, I suppose, about this, all of about a minute, that it might be a good idea to take a look at the covers albums that they released in the mid-90s and then in the early 2000s. Now, we know that the whole covers Quo have been doing covers for years, right? Way back in the 60s they were doing covers. But the first covers album was in, 95, 96 for Don't Stop. And what I tend to find is that the idea of like the Quo cover as it became, almost like Quo by Numbers cover, as in let's take that song and do it in a Quo style, really comes about because of the Anniversary Waltz. That seems to be like the first instance. Yeah, they did covers, but they made it pretty much their own way before, whereas some of the covers are very by numbers later on, and certainly you find that once you get to Famous in the Last Century. But we'll get to that in a moment. So we'll start with Don't Stop, released in the mid-90s, and it kicks off with Fun, 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 the song that got them banned from Radio 1. It was a great combination of artists at the time, though, and I've spoken to Beach Boys fans who absolutely love that interpretation of it. We go on to When You Walk in the Room, a 60s staple. Again, Quo made it their own, and one thing I like about this album is they do this, you know, they're not just straightforward copies. I Can Hear the Grass Grow, kind of an attempt at doing a part rock, part psychedelia thing on it. There's a couple of Chuck Berry tracks on it. I mean, doing You Never Can Tell, I think it's been a bit of a problem for Quo fans for a long time because, of course, Rick appears to be playing piano on that rather than guitar. Certainly going by the live video that was released around that same time, so people do tend to have a problem with it. It kind of symbolizes light Quo, if you will, you know, that sort of light boppy, and of course there's that famous accordion in there as well. Then we go on to Get Back, obviously a Beatles cover. Let's talk about Safety Dance, Men Without Hats. Now, this was a weird one because I feel like for this album they tried to do something that was different. They tried to veer away at times from the shuffle and almost give Andy something to do, and that's what it feels like with that. And of course they've got Tessa Niles on backing vocals and lead vox on that one, doing stuff, and all over this album they've got guest vocalists. They got Maddy Prior in it. There's Brian May on the next track, Raining in My Heart, great Buddy Holly song. Then we have Fleetwood Mac's Don't Stop, which again is one of the great Quo covers. Then we go into Sorrow, which, you know, classic song, and again one of my favourites from the album because they're using technology. There's a great use of echo in there a couple of times. And Proud Mary, a song very much covered, but Rick pretty much does it justice there. I absolutely love Rick's vocals on that song. Just as it goes into that middle section where he starts it with the line, "If you go down to the river," those vocals are just like spine-tingling good. And with those backing vocalists as well, and all the elements they've got in there, it's just one of his best performances. Now, we're going to Lucille, which has been done by Quo before. It was done in the Anniversary Waltz, but I know people have often criticised that the Lucille in the Anniversary Waltz and the Lucille on Don't Stop are vastly different, because the earlier one is a lot more energetic and the latter one is more kind of groovy. And, it depends really. One is part of a medley, so kind of has to be in the same vibe as the rest of it. That one's by itself. I think they were focusing on the bass line for that, and you can hear Rhino's bass line, and he does a good job on it. That's quite a common bass line in rock and roll, and they got a chance to do it. It's almost rockabilly type stuff. Then we go on to Johnny and Mary, the Robert Palmer cover. I do recommend checking out Ricky Owens' cover of that song, which is part based on Quo, part based on Robert Palmer, and I think Francis does quite a good job on that. And again, it's veering away from the 12-bar stuff that Quo is known for, whereas the next track on that album, Get Out of Denver, is a rip-roaring, how many words do they want to fit into this verse kind of song? And they did do it live for a little while as well, which it kind of worked, but I think the problem with live is there was just too many words in that song. It's a Quo song, and certainly fans want to hear it. It's in the vibe. I mean, it's certainly up there with Dave Edmunds' cover for me, Get Out of Denver. I like the way that the expletive that Rick utters in the kind of solo section is hidden. And do you know what? I played that on internet radio for years, and I never realised that was in there. And no one ever complained. So it was well hidden. So The Future's So Bright, I've Got to Wear Shades. Again, in the video, one of Rick's cooler moments, and Tessa Niles is back on lead vocals. Then we finish the album with another track that's in for contention, All Around My Hat with Maddy Prior, or Prior, however you say it. Yeah, Steeleye Span did it justice, and Quo pretty much does it as well. The fact that it was pretty much a single, wasn't it? It was a single, and it again, it's sort of Quo trying something different but still being kind of on the same lines. And I know some fans hate it, other fans love it. It's one that divides them very, very much. So that's a Don't Stop album, which I think is inventive. I think it takes some of what Quo is known for, and it kind of turns one half of it on its head, and the other half, you know exactly where it is. It's that kind of album, and no wonder it got to number 2 in the charts. Now, the follow-up Covers album is something of an oddity because, well, it just sounds like Quo by numbers, really. It doesn't sound like they've really tried to reinvent anything. It doesn't sound like there's been much in it. Sounds like they've gone into the studio and done it in a couple of days. It kind of has that vibe. And there's some great versions on here. I'm not going to go through it track by track because, to be honest, I've just done that with Don't Stop. And this one, people are quite divided about this one, because I think the majority tend to think that it's not their finest hour. Let's just say that. It's got some decent songs on there. You've got the likes of Old Time Rock and Roll, great version. I particularly like Rave On. When I'm Dead or Gone is very good. People like Roll Over Beethoven. The Sweet Home Chicago, I mean, that's a great version. I love the groove on Good Golly Miss Molly, the piano. I love the kind of the weird bit at the beginning of Once Bitten, Twice Shy. I love the groove of Mony, but there's something about it just seems like they're not having the best time. Like, they're really accomplished musicians, and they're able to turn their hand to anything, but it doesn't sound like to me like they've gone in and said, right, let's change this around. Let's change the tempo of Memphis, Tennessee, or let's add something into this song. It's very much a jukebox album. It's sort of thing where everybody will know the songs regardless of who's singing it, and it's very much in that style. Last but not least, we come to the follow-up to Heavy Traffic from 2002, Riffs from 2003, which they were very clever here because obviously the new management have said, well, you had great success, Quo, with doing covers albums, so they've got one out of them. There's great cover versions on here of I Fought the Law, and Tobacco Road's pretty good. Don't Bring Me Down is interesting. I do love the way that they've said, right, you need to tour this album. Oh, okay, we're going to tour the album. We're going to call the tour after the album. Great. Right, now you need to play some tracks from it. Okay, so what they've done, quite cleverly, is they've stuck Caroline at the front. They have done Junior's Wailing, which of course they've been doing in concert for years. There's versions of Down the Dustpipe, Whatever You Want, Rockin' All Over the World, brand new versions, and they've stuck it on this album of cover versions. Extremely clever, so that they don't have to play, Born to Be Wild live and be ridiculed by people that perhaps are just casual fans or whatever and go, well, it's not as good as Steppenwolf. So it's extremely clever to have done that, and I have to say I do love that version of Junior's Wailing on there. I think Rick's playing on that is absolutely sublime and probably one of the best tracks on the album, but then it's the one that they've probably played the most, bar the massive hits, certainly back in the 70s, so no wonder he's got that groove down. So overall, they're free forays into covers albums. We're not talking about the acoustic albums today. I know they're kind of covering themselves, but I do think that they're a different kettle of fish. We will get to those another day. But what do you think of the covers albums? I know that at the time of doing these albums, members of the band were not always that enthusiastic about them. But as a fan, do you have a favourite one? Or are there sort of tracks on each of them that are just as good? I think if I was going for my personal preference, I think for me, Don't Stop is by far the best of the trio of those albums, simply because there's inventiveness there. And not to say there aren't great ideas on the other two, it just feels like they're doing cover versions of them, rather than going, right, how can we put our own spin on it? They're playing the riffs and they're playing almost the arrangement. Like there was a thing in the 60s where pretty much every band played the same arrangement of several different songs, and that's kind of what it feels like. You realise I'm trying to say this in the nicest possible way so as not to anger those people that actually do like it. I mean, I like it. I'm a big fan of these albums. I love these albums, but I think that I'm just trying to take a look at these albums and a bit closer, because people for some reason or other haven't always appreciated these albums. But the thing that you have to realise about these albums, I suppose, is that they got them through quite difficult periods. The first one was that midpoint in the 90s after Thirsty Work, where that was a great album of songs but not particularly Quo-like. Between that and the Under the Influence album, leading to somewhat of a golden age, without including Riffs in that list. Riffs or Famous in the Last Century. The line that says that Under the Influence, Heavy Traffic, and The Party Ain't Over Yet, to a smaller degree, are returns to form for the Quo, along with In Search of the Fourth Chord. So it feels good to shine a light on these albums, and so one of these days go back and listen to any one of these free albums and let me know what you think. This has been Jamie Dyer here on the Quo-Cast. I'll see you next time.